best you can and taking care of your comrades. You know, that's what you end up doing in a combat situation anyway. You're protecting each other and looking out for each other, and so you don't dwell on the negative side of it at all.
I mean, you had a job to do, and when you talked about the jobs you were asked to do, you had to have your head about you.
Yeah, and then you had to, your concentration had to
Exactly.
be for that. So,
And then to protect each other and the camaraderie that comes with serving like this. And how do other veterans from other wars treat you? How do the current young veterans treat you as a Vietnam veteran?
very well now. I mean, everybody you meet, you know, it's more thank you for your service, and so it's changed over the years
And that's not even just veterans, that's more in the public. People
as
will
well.
acknowledge
Yes.
even.
Mhm.
Yes. So the situation where the unpopular war, you know, you're feeling more support. No ticker tape parades when you came home, but you feel more support now for
Right.
your service. Right.
Now, one thing I have noticed, you know, in Vietnam, it was on the news all the time. Where here lately, you know, you've got people over there, and nobody really feels any connection, so to speak. I mean, we all go about our daily lives here, but unless you know somebody directly, um, you know, the sacrifice is not in the public domain as far as service even today.
Now, the sacrifice isn't in the public domain, meaning, explain that a little better.
Well, we go about our daily lives. There's no impact of the war. I mean, we don't see it.
I see what you mean. I
behind
do
the
see what
scenes,
you mean.
economically, it's, you know, we're spending billions, but nobody, you know, sees it on a daily basis in their lives, which I think, you know, that's a missing link there, I think.
So, would you say, are there any life lessons or lessons for society to learn from war? From your experience in the wars or just war itself?
Well, I could give you a quote that I like from Carl Cross. He's a very well-known strategist, and
Please do.
his quote is, war, first one hopes to win, then one expects the enemy to lose, then one is satisfied that he too is suffering. In the end, one is surprised that everyone has lost. So I think as a society, war should be the very last-ditch effort and not something that looks like it'll be a quick ending to a quick solution.
Ken, that's just an amazing thing to end on. And thank you so much. We have
Sure.
to call it a show, and I appreciate that quote and appreciate your words, you know, words for peace, you know, to support peace. And also thank you so much in honor of this Veterans Day for serving your country, our country. So
Thank you.
this is Joan with the Joan Jerkovich Show, and be sure to go again to joanjerkovich.com for the video outtakes and links to iTunes and my blog site. Thanks so much for joining us today for innovative talk radio that surprises, entertains, and sometimes informs you. It's the Joan Jerkovich Show, 9 a.m. Saturdays on 910 KINA Salina. That's, you know, I want to continue a little bit of our discussion because a lot of people watch the video because just what you brought in here today and showed me, you know, you're a man advocating for peace, aren't you?
Well, yes. And,
Absolutely.
I mean, if war is inevitable, you know, you do your role, but it should be. I think we're too quick to jump into war thinking that it's going to be a easy solution, and it usually is not.
Well, and I, having been a Republican most of my adult life, did actually switch my party affiliation when Bush sent us into this last conflict. I know, to be honest, a lot of it was being a mother with four children of the age to be drafted, should that have happened. And I still maintain, though, just like you, that, you know, these solutions have to be looked at, you know, for the diplomacy and last resort, you know, to take us into war. And, you know, we're here at Fox News, and sometimes I like to, you know, have an opportunity to give a little bit of a different viewpoint. But that, you know, for me is why I support President Obama, and did support him because, again, at that time, one of my thoughts of this seated president is he is a diplomat, and he is going to try to use diplomacy wherever he can to keep that from happening. And how do you feel about him now honoring his campaign pledge to pull the service people out? I think there's about 20,000 in Iraq.
Yeah, on the surface that looks good.
It's a complicated thing.
It is.
It is.
You know, I mentioned the Guard having served 2 and 3 tours, perhaps, and you know, I got the newsletter, you know, just yesterday in the mail that the aviation battalion that I commanded is going to Iraq this year. So,
oh wow,
250 people, and that's their 4th deployment. And
when did you
years.
retire from that? When you just
I
recently
retired? In January 2003.
Okay.
Just before the Iraq, and I was on a stop loss for just over a year. It's where I tried to retire prior to that, but they kept me in until.
Oh, okay. So you were hoping to retire sooner, but they kept you in.
Right.
But now, when you retired in 2003, your unit has been sent over 4 times.
Well, there was a Bosnia
okay. At that
deployment prior to that, but yeah, 3 times since then.
58,000 killed in the Vietnam War. U.S. service 58,200 something. That's
right.
And that those numbers in my mind don't even touch the other issues of you know, people who maybe weren't killed but certainly came back with permanent handicaps,
Right.
be it, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder or other handicaps, you know, physical handicaps.
And I think that's the big tragedy, well, an additional unintended consequence of this last Iraq, Afghanistan conflicts is the amount of time, you know, 3 and 4 deployments is a terribly long commitments, you know, a year at a time. And with the EID explosion, not knowing when they're going to occur, you know, I think the impact psychologically is going to be a lasting problem.
Well, I did the interview on PTSD with Ashley Jarvis here, who served and had 2 deployments, and he did work with the EID units. He was in a convoy unit where they had to go out. He had he had Rumsfeld with him and high-ranking generals. So of course they went out first, and you know, and there definitely were incidents of people he served with being killed, but more of them even being affected permanently by the traumatic brain injury that occurs, because even though the bombs may not go off to physically hurt you, the reverb and impact absolutely just damages the brain. And he had I mean, it was one of the most touching interviews I've done. He had some things to say about some of his buddies who came back and the troubles they've had. You know, they're truly handicapped, and then to feel so many of them that they've had a hard time even getting benefits and losing their homes and their marriages, and you know, it's just been a real interesting, difficult thing. But he commented, if you go and watch on my website, Ken, he commented about when he meets Vietnam veterans, he makes a special point of thanking them, because he recognizes, and he was kind of speaking somewhat for other veterans of different generations, how unlauded and, you know, unappreciated you were by society. And yet, you know, you were in horrific situations, obviously, as well. So it seems we do have a little more patriotism in place with what we have with our service people now, you know, coming back and coming through. You've been at airports. You've seen them in their uniforms. Everyone stands up to applaud.
Right.
You know, and you didn't get that. you know, when you came back. You didn't even want to wear your uniform, you said. So, were the drugs in Vietnam what everyone hears about it? Was that just in certain segments?
No,
and I think that was in the culture here as well.
It was, well, you know, that was in the 60s.
Yeah,
and that was,
it was
the culture
the
at the
hippie
time. And in Vietnam, it was very, very easy to get, very cheap. So, yeah, you saw that.
But as a pilot, I would think, weren't you guys kind of scrutinized more
we
carefully?
scrutinized very well.
Exactly.
I mean, so all flight crews, you know, it was self-protection.
Absolutely.
So if anyone...
Were they actively drug testing you?
No,
okay.
It was before drug tests, but we self-policed ourselves. But you had the normal suicides and other, you know, on guard duty, you'd have some of the soldiers falling asleep, which, you know, naively I thought that was a shooting, you know, you get court-martialed or whatever, but that was just somebody.
What would they fall asleep?
Well, they would be on drugs
so
marijuana,
they just
whatever, and
forgot what they were supposed to be doing
and
and
fall
just
asleep. And
weren't
some of
paying
them,
attention.
you know, got their throats cut because they were asleep. But
who would do that?
Well, the enemy would come through the
I
lines.
see what you mean. Yeah, they were in enough of an active combat area that they had a job to do.
So you did see it.
Wow.
It wasn't rampant, but in the aviation side, but it was there. It was easily accessible. So.
Why was that? Where was it coming from? Coming from local?
Oh, yeah.
It was all local source, and
Mm-hmm.
most of it was marijuana, or were there just pretty much everything?
Pretty much everything, but
really?
Mostly...
Was LSD real big at the time, or?
No, you didn't see so much LSD as just heroin. But marijuana was the vast majority.
The big one. So you're not a proponent for legalizing marijuana?
Well, it's interesting because we spend a lot of money trying to enforce, you know, if there was no demand, there wouldn't be the traffic. And I think, personally, I would probably support marijuana as legal just because when you make it illegal, it's just...
all the resources, the money. I agree. I mean, I think we could all balance our budgets.
And I think
that's what I've kind of said. I mean it's here to stay. Yeah. And I think that even some of the medical science that I've at least looked into, it's not a known addictive, physiologically addictive substance. You know, you obviously say, you know, now psychologically it can be, supposedly.
Well, cigarettes, you could make the same argument, but...
I think actually cigarettes are more physically addicting than, well, of course, like, yeah, but you're smoking marijuana too, but what I've read about it. And, but it does affect how people perform, you know, like you said, you weren't going to, you know, be having your pilots and co-pilots, you know, flying the plane with it because it affects performance, so...
Yeah, so, you know, as a society, the amount of resources we put forward, and I think most people, even in the drug enforcement, which I know several, and I've done some myself, kind of agree that even some of the government agencies are saying that they would probably do it, but they can't really because they've... so long they said it was such a bad thing, and they can't just say now it's okay. Right. But, you know, from the standpoint of the court system and law enforcement and jails and airspace and everything else, I kind of think it's a bit of a waste. Right.
And then the billions spent on our war efforts. Wow, that's just, you know, taking us over the edge too. So
well, the war costs, you know, we don't know the half of it either. So I think it's much larger than what the public realizes.
I don't doubt. Well, I better let you go. Thank
Okay.
you so much, Ken.
Thanks
for coming to talk to us.